it's time now for us to talk in more detail now about this album, to begin the journey around this album, which is, I mean, it's such an incredible body of work. I cannot tell you as a fan enough how happy I am to listen to this record, and also how heartbreaking I find myself feeling in listening to this album. And not necessarily because I'm feeling your pain, because it brings back mine. So it's the ultimate gift in that regard. But to get to that place where the music is as honest as it is, you've got to find a willing partner. You got to find someone. We don't have to do it yourselves, but that's going to be intense. And you settled on a brilliant young creative called Jack Antonoff. So why? What were the qualities in Jack that made you trust him so quickly with these stories that each of you have experienced in your lives, but are so heartbreakingly told?
Have you met Jack before?
Unfortunately, yes. I don't like the guy. Is the honest truth.
He's very easy to like and feel comfortable with right off the bat.
Yeah. But I get that, and I'm not trying to, obviously he's a wonderful human, but there's hanging out with someone in a bar or whatever and going, I like this guy or I like this girl, I'll be friends with him. It's another thing to feel that sense of openness in a room with an acoustic guitar, knowing that you are charting new territory in the moment as well, right?
It is different, and we had written with a couple of other people before we got to Jack. And of course, everyone is nice and lovely to work with. We should try to figure out what it is about Jack. One thing I really liked is that, a lot of people are fans of ours, but I think a lot of times in the industry, it's more who we are and probably our politics. And so they're fans, but they couldn't name a bunch of songs probably.
They like your house. They like coming around to your house.
Right.
They like the idea of us.
Right.
That's interesting.
And Jack really knew his stuff. He truly knew our music, and and he's just so open and so verbal and vocal, and just had excitement and enthusiasm, but also really seemed to have a sense of where all we could go. He also didn't limit us. A lot of times too, people have their idea of who you are, but most times with us, it doesn't match up. Some of the stuff we would start writing would start sounding like what we call bro country. And Jack just really got that we can sound like us playing anything, because, a fiddle and a banjo and 3-part harmony is nothing you can turn into something else, but you can
for sure
bring those things to songs that would not be what people think of as an automatic fit.
Wow, this is that what a time to be alive moment, because this is one of those moments where the intersection between influence and influenced perfectly meets, because these artists that you've influenced are now ultimately influencing you, because they've taken music in this space into new territory. Taylor Swift being an obvious example of someone who absolutely reveres and loves the Chicks, but has found a space for pop music, for all of that songwriting to exist in, and I guess in a weird way, to some degree, consciously or subconsciously, influenced you, hence the crossroads.
And I think Jack, having worked with so many female artists, that didn't really play into anything, but it's evidence of the fact that he's able to be in that world, and it's just the way we communicate. Other people can't understand it because there's a lot that goes unsaid. But I think partially because he grew up with 2 sisters, and he's just used to being around women and how women communicate, it just seemed very seamless to me. I mean, just put aside his amazing musical talent, and he can play anything under the sun, pull out any idea and put it down right away, which is so inspiring when you're in the studio.
And he's a very confident person as well. He didn't hold back around us. And so we loved that right away. We always if you can make a crack or make a joke about one of us, then we're gonna be friends.
What's his for sure? No, he's a piss taker of the highest order. That's why I love him.
And we give it right back, and he can take it.
Hang on a second. Hang on a minute. Hang on.
Hello?
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 Hello? Yeah. I can't hear you, but I can smell you.
Are my people there?
I can smell. Yeah. The chicks are here, bro. The chicks are here.
Hi, Jack.
Hi.
What are you guys talking about?
You?
I thought that Marty would be, she would speak kindly of you, but as it turns out, she doesn't think much of you, bro. I hate to break it to you.
Marty's been roasting me more than any. Like, I thought Natalie would be. I always knew Emily was on my side. I thought Natalie would be giving me a lot of crap, but my dad said that in an article, Marty said that like she didn't know if I was like out of touch or ironic or something like that.
Well, let me ask her right now, whilst you can't hear it. Which one is it, Marty? Is it out of touch or is it ironic?
Well, I was only talking about his fashion sense, and we all know how he dresses.
Just talking about your fashion
I
sense.
just want to say
bro.
this: none of these three people you're speaking to should come for me because I have so much dirt on all of them.
Good. So we're going to catch up with you on Monday, next Monday, return of Jack Antonoff. We're going to do like a nice little, we're going to do like a recurring show. You can be like a resident on my show. Spill the chicks. It's called Spill the Chicks.
Spill the chicks. Yeah, just roast the chicks. It's a podcast about
Spill the chicks.
just, all the dirt.
The sound of this record is such a modern sound, and yet it retains so much of the authenticity and the real sort of the comforting soul that the Chicks can bring to their music. What was the inspiration behind that? As producer, why did you sort of encourage them to move in this space, or were you encouraged to move in that space, or was it both?
When we got in the room, there was so much that they were all listening to and showing me and that they were loving. And a lot of it was really, really modern, like stuff that had just come out. And so, it wasn't quick, but it was somewhat of a seamless process of just like starting to understand the language of like, oh, like, okay, you like this kind of sound and this kind of sound. And then being able to sew a line where it's like, all right, here's the authentic version to the Chicks version of that sound. We're not going to have, let's say, like 808s on the album, but there was a lot of conversation about low end and, them liking a lot of the modern low end. So it's like the Chicks version of that is like we got so much out of that, out of like even like low dobro stuff that Emily was playing. Like we would actually make that sound like sort of like a buzzy Moog or something. So it was a really interesting idea of like figuring out what they were into, understanding their sound.
It's crazy because, in the first 3 seconds of Sleep at Night, when the fill just leads into the drums, it does have that sense of like it feels almost like a loop. Like it has that vibe, that instant vintage real weightiness that came from like digging in the crates or something. I don't know, you've just nailed it. You guys, you've all nailed it.
Well, that's one thing I'll say about Sleep at Night and just to show you how delicate that balance was. So getting those drums right, that's a combination of Teddy Geiger's drums, Natalie's son Beckett playing live, me playing live, and then the brilliant Chad Smith playing live. So you have that one thing that you hear on Sleep at Night which just feels kind of like a really cool marching drum, but it took all these different drummers and programs all put together to feel sort of authentic and modern all at once.
All right, Jack, I got one more question right here. Just eeny, meeny, miny, mo this, or quickly rattle off each of their funniest or most distinctive traits in the studio. You got the dirt. Now's the time to spill a little tea.
Okay. Well, I would say everything happens after 6 o'clock because that's when the wine drinking starts.
Right. Good. I like that.
So, it's like, the whole day we're working and then come around 6 o'clock, like everything gets like real loose and weird. I would say, I will say this. I do think one way to loosen up a room and make it great work is to let yourself take the fall. And there were many, many times where I let the three of them just make fun of me for hours.
That's not true.
You have a deep understanding of that dynamic, and you obviously speak the unique language that relates to the female spirit because you grew up with sisters, and so you're able to take that beating.
Yes, very, very happy to take it, and important to put yourself in a room with actual geniuses, which they are, because then when you get the beating, it makes you better.
It's worth it. Hey, Jack. Hey, you're a good man. Love you, Jack. Thanks for stopping by, and everyone's
Love
thrilled.
you, Jack. Love you.
Love you.
Bye. What a sweetheart. Kauai is one of my special places, and I've been lucky enough to spend a few times. I've been out there. It's the spirit of that place is remarkable, and it's on one hand up there in terms of the amount of oxygen and energy you get in that place. It's just so incredibly replenishing. I couldn't think of a better place to go out there and connect to some of the harder side of this album, the harder stuff to have to get out. Was that where a lot of that came from? Did you lean into Kauai as a safe space?
Well, I have a house on Kauai, and so it is definitely my safe space. I wish I was there during all of this quarantine. That would be heaven. But we only got to be there for 3 weeks, but it was 3 amazing weeks. And there's 3 songs in particular on the album that I would say we consider that we wrote in Kauai, and that was Hope It's Something Good, My Best Friend's Weddings, and
Set Me Free.
Set Me Free.
Set Me
Set
Free.
me free.
So can I just say that yes, there's the answer to that question yet, because those are three very, very honest and heartbreaking songs.
Yeah, and there's ukulele on the two ballads, and you can also hear, like, if you were listening with headphones, you can hear birds or a rooster, maybe some ocean waves. So yeah, those to me, those are the Kauai songs. Even though we worked on "Tights on My Boat" there, and we worked on other songs there.
What's amazing about the record is that as a child of divorce, and I know each of you have had the challenge of going through this. In my parents' life when I was a kid, it was, it entirely set the stall for me in a lot of ways in terms of how I matured, how fast I matured. And I watched my mother in particular go through this process. The anger, the frustration, the confusion, the grieving, the acceptance, and ultimately the space to move forward. And to me, it feels like the album flows like that. It feels like there is a sense start to finish of almost a therapeutic concept to this. It just, listening to it, that's what I connected to as a person. And I don't know if there's a question in there, but if it strikes a chord with you, any of you, I'd love to hear your take on that.
I was thinking about that today. Like, what people say, is this a divorce album or a breakup album? And how many emotions you go through during that process. One day
Sure.
you're angry, one day you're sad and you cry, and then the next day you're horny.
You're powered.
Yeah. Or drunk and feeling fucking awesome.
So it's like, so even though it's a breakup, somewhat of a breakup album, you kind of touch on all aspects of emotion, and so it makes for some really fun songs as well as sad songs.
Definitely. What song was the hardest to get just right, given that so many of these songs strike about such a perfect balance of the personal and the universal?
We've talked about March March being one of the hardest ones to finish. It went through many different iterations. And when you're writing a song about something from like a perspective on the world, I think it's even more critical that you get it right. It was a heavy subject and it needed to have the appropriate heavy track. So we were willing to put in the time and headspace to get that one just right.
Yeah. And that's one of those songs that will change shape over time too. Because the original inspiration behind it, of course, it can be applied now in so many different ways, because to march for something is to believe in something. And you have your own specific inspiration behind that song, but you got to let it go at some point, right? You got to let other people apply it. What are you hoping people are using that song for right now? What's really close to your heart that you would love that song to represent right now?
I mean, I think everything in the video, Black Lives Matter and women's rights and equal pay and Native
Gun
Americans
control.
and LGBTQ and gun control, all of it. But I think that's what's cool about the song is it's not so much about all the causes. I mean, the video is, and we definitely sing about certain things in the verses, but it's really about the listener and the person, whatever it is that you're passionate about and that's important to you, you have that power to be an army of one, stick to your guns, do what you believe is right in your heart, unless you believe racism is in your heart. Don't follow your heart on that one.